Go. Right. Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Peak District National Park Authority, Friday the 8th of November. Some of you, maybe all of you, will be aware perhaps that the website has been down and things haven't been accessible. I have to ask, in the interests of regulations and things, is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to read the papers for today? Because if you haven't, you can't make an informed decision, and we may be looking at adjourning for 15 minutes to enable people to have a look at the hard copy papers. So is there anyone who hasn't? Bill? Right, I'm not sure. Is that appropriate?
Well,
I'll just take some legal advice.
Yeah. So, in relation to the matters that need decision, are you happy to... Perhaps we could have introductions from officers for those matters to ensure that you're properly informed when you're making the decision then? Is that okay?
And Charlotte, did you put your hand up?
Well, yeah, despite getting here extra early to people, I'm still reading them and understanding.
Right, but it's Angela?
In those circumstances, I think we should have a 15-minute adjournment just to allow further reading.
Yep. Okay, so there we are. We're adjourning for 15 minutes for any members of the public who are listening in to enable members to be as fully informed as possible as part of the decision-making process. So for those who already have read the papers, you can relax. And for those who have speed reading duties, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, we're on.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Okay, thank you, members. We've now completed our 15-minute adjournment, so we're starting again on the National Park Authority meeting on Friday the 8th of November. It's now 10:15, or technically I think 10:16, so thank you for that. And if anyone wishes to use their iPads to access the paperwork, access the digital material, it's now back online, I'm informed. So as well as the hard copy that you've got, you can also access the internet material. So we go into agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Patrick Brady, Andrew Hart, Andrew Gregory and Jean Warmby. Does anyone bring any other apologies? If not, thank you. We go on to the minutes of the last meeting on the 27th of September. I just draw attention to item 8424 on page 6, where the authority's solicitor was tasked with confirming the authority's position on the landscape AI issue. Angela?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies, members, for not sending out an email on this previously. I will be sending out an email next week just to advise the complexities of this. Essentially, we do own the intellectual property code, but it's specific to the flora of our national park, so there's certain limitations as to how we can use that. So I'll send an email out next week just to confirm the detail to everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. There's just a couple of corrections I'd like to make on the same paragraph. 3 lines from the bottom, it should read Sheffield's Hunter Archaeological Society. Well, no, that's the only correction, but just for information, the reference to the aerial photography conference that will now be taking place in March of 25. Are there any other corrections that members might wish to draw attention to? If not, can we accept in that case the minutes? Can I have a move? Someone move the? Thank you, Matt. Second, Charles. And a show of hands, please. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Item 3, I've not been informed of any urgent business. Item 4, not been informed of any public participation. So item 5, are there any declarations of interest that members might wish to make? Mike Chaplin.
Yeah, personal interest in item 10.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
as a member of Sheffield City Council.
Indeed. Thank you, Mike. Any other declarations of interest? If not, thank you. We move on to items for information. Chair's briefing. In the haste to leave home this morning, I managed to leave my paperwork behind, but I made a few notes just to a relatively quiet time for myself since the September 27th meeting of the authority, not least because I missed a couple of the finance workshop, Parishes Day and Planning Committee through ill health, but I hope you'll be reassured to know I'm better now, with all that implies. I've attended with the Deputy Chair, Buxton Town team, on the 15th of October, Sustainable Travel Conference, which was very useful to get insights into initiatives that are taking place in and around Buxton, not least to do with White Peak Loop and the very light rail provision that's being pursued. I attended as authority representative the meeting of the Derbyshire Archaeological Advisory Committee on the 16th of October, and unfortunately I haven't had time to submit my report on that, but as a verbal at this stage, the principal issue that was being addressed was the publication of ACID, which for those in the know, it's the acronym for Archaeology and Conservation in Derbyshire and the Peak District. Unfortunately, because of the funding constraints that Derbyshire County Council's under, the council hasn't been able to support it financially this year, as it wasn't last. The National Park Authority continues so to do. But I think the positive and important thing is that there's a crowdfunding initiative that has been launched to raise £1,400 for 2000 edition publication, and it's already reached £1,200. So there's a really positive response from particularly people who receive that little magazine each year. For those of you who don't know it, it's a free magazine that's issued It starts at the Derbyshire Archaeology Day at the end of January each year, and reports on archaeological and other heritage initiatives across the Peak District and Derbyshire as well. Along with the Chief Exec, on the 21st of October, I attended the 75th anniversary event launched by Natural England at the House of Parliament, where, as is recorded in the Chief Exec's report, there were presentations by the Chair of Natural England, the Chief Exec of Natural England, and Steve Reed, the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. And I was able, just coincidentally happened to be in the right place at the right time to have a quick word with him at the end of that event, which was quite useful, at least from my perspective. Basically, it was about, in the context of Natural England and the focus on nature, don't forget landscape and cultural heritage, as you might expect me to say, perhaps. 22nd of October was the National Parks England board meeting, where, amongst other things, there was a debrief on the outputs from the National Parks UK conference that both Chief Exec and I and Deputy attended in September. And then at the beginning of this week, there was a Chairs and Vice Chairs meeting, discuss matters of import, various, and then on Wednesday was the National Parks Partnership AGM, which I attended as a board member of the National Parks Partnership. National Parks Partnership is principally the fundraising body for national parks, and they have been, amongst other things, they've raised the funding for the BMW input, electric car charging points and things like that. And it was looking at and approving their plan for the next 4 years, a shift from what in their terms they described the funding arrangements they had achieved so far was tackling the low-hanging fruit, i.e. the relatively small amounts of 5-figure sums, and a focus more on the 6- and 7-figure sums for the future to achieve a more and longer-lasting impact on national park delivery of national park objectives through financial support from outside organisations. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my Chair's briefing. If I can move on to the Chief Exec's report, which has been published. You will have read it. Phil, a couple of updates, I believe.
Yeah, the main thing to update on is just to say that there have been now meetings between National Parks England and Steve Reed's Special Advisory Team. You'll see in the report that National Parks England, as our umbrella body, is putting together a plan, a great national parks plan. They're focusing on these the mission, these 5 missions to tie in with the Labour missions coming into government. So there's a really good, compelling ask or offer really to government of how we can help deliver the mission. So that's all happening. It's ongoing. This week the meeting took place with Steve Reed's special advisors, which was, obviously it was a confidential meeting, but I'm told it was a very useful meeting. Not surprisingly, some of the special advisors aren't yet up to speed on national parks, and so this is an opportunity to give them that kind of briefing. And I think it's not really breaking any confidences to say the messages coming back are it's going to be extremely tight fiscally within the department. And we don't yet know, obviously, how that's going to play out for us. In my report, you'll see that we are expecting a 1-year settlement for next year and then a 3-year settlement. That gives government the time to do a comprehensive spending review over the next year to work out the longer-term picture. And we are unlikely to hear our settlement for next year, our 1-year settlement for next year, until DEFRA have now done all their internal business planning. So that's going to be in the new year, likely, that we'll find out what our budget is for next year, or what our core grant is for next year.
Thank you, Phil. There's an opportunity. I know that it's a report just for information, but Janet Dugdale.
Yes, Phil, thank you very much for your report. A couple of questions. The first is, you've made a statement there has been slow progress with the guidance on the new duty to further the purposes of national parks. Is that referring in relation to the management plan? and commitment by partners, or is it something else? I didn't quite understand that. And secondly, thank you for the update on departmental budgets. Do we have any sense yet what the implications are of employers' national insurance on our expenses, our costs for next year?
Yes. So the first question is around the LURA, the Local Government, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. That had the new duty for public bodies to further our purposes. The guidance from government is what that means for those public bodies. And the reason that's been slow in coming out is that DEFRA, although they're producing that, they've had to go to all the other departments and they've had to get kind of cross-departmental support and sign-off. And of course that's taken time and been quite tricky. So we are expecting, we're told by Christmas that we will have that guidance. That will be really helpful for us because this is new territory. It hasn't really been tested out yet. And in fact, there are other organisations who may be trying to push this through, judicial review and so on, where they feel this duty hasn't been upheld. So it is new ground. We're really welcoming the guidance when it comes out because that'll give us something to go to our water companies, to our other local authority partners, to Natural England even, and of course it will apply to ourselves as well. But that always was the case. In terms of national insurance contributions, we have done some modelling from that. That's not a secret. It's about 220,000. Extra for this authority. So that's a significant amount that's not in our budget. What we don't yet know is whether there'll be any sort of dispensation for a national park authority. And I believe the last time this happened, no dispensation was given to national park authorities. I mean, across the 8 national parks that are in National Parks England, it's over £1 million hit, and the Peak District is the most significant by some way. And that's reflects our large staff size, but that also reflects the fact that we're doing a lot of work. So in a way, it reflects our success that we're being hit so hard with it. But you can't deny that is a big amount that we will go on through the business planning now to have a look at how we deal with that.
Simon?
Phil, just a clarification. The 5 missions you talked about, is that the 5 overarching Labour missions, or is it the 5 DEFRA priorities?
No, well, it's actually 5 National Park England missions. So we've bundled our work into 5 missions that tie in with what Labour are trying to achieve with their mission. So we're using the same language of missions. So the 5 that National Parks England are going to kind of badge up are climate resilience and adaptation, nature recovery, driving sustainable economic growth, access to nature and health, well-being and future generations. So it's really kind of a way of packaging up what we're doing anyway into helping government see that what we're doing really fits in with their policy objectives.
Okay, if there are no further comments, we're just asked to note the report from the Chief Exec, so have a show of hands. Yep, thank you, that's noted. I've omitted to pick up on one point in my slot, which is that members will have received an email from Ruth Crowder recently to do with the consultation on remote attendance at meetings. The interpretation of that consultation appears to be that there's an expectation on government's part that for individual responses, if people are so moved, rather than corporate ones, mine may well incorporate corporate views, but that's for me as chair. But I'm just bringing to members' attention, that consultation is there. It's open until December 19th, and it appears that the expectation is that individual members would make responses. So given the number of councils and similar bodies across the country, there could be quite a lot of responses. On the other hand, there could be quite few, depending on people's appetites. But I just raise it for members' attention. So, in that case, thank you, Phil, and thank you for the questions. We move on to item 8 and the decision-making section of the report. The first item then is the Authority Progress Report Mid-Year Decile 3 for 24-25. Sarah Rowley is our Data Strategy and Performance Officer, is here to answer any queries. Have you any comments to make in the initial? So, members, assuming that folk have had a chance to read the report, are there any comments or questions that anyone might wish to make? James Beresford, and then Mike Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair.
And Janet.
Sarah and colleagues, I'd just like to... I was able to click through electronically and see the detailed report at the back. And I'd like to firstly congratulate you on that, because I think it is the clearest demonstration of progress that I've seen in my time here. So please do keep that good work going. I think the only point I would make is there has been some movement into the red box. And I can understand why the DEFRA grant has moved into there from amber. I can absolutely understand that. I'm less clear on why the impact of users has moved into that red box from amber. What has escalated it? It's always been an issue that maybe we felt we could manage, or maybe we felt we and our partners could manage, but now it's become red. Is that evidence-based, or is that reporting, or is that damage to the landscape? I can't quite see what that is. I am probably missing something.
Thanks, James. We'll try not to identify whatever might be missing, but Sarah. Yep.
Thanks, James. Some of the management board are here, so they might be able to expand on it, but from a point of view of moving that risk higher, it was really to do with the amount of scrutiny that was around this issue and the amount of work that we are hoping to do in the future to actually bring more clarification. So it was really just to reflect that escalation.
Could I just come back, Chair, very briefly? What scrutiny?
Sorry?
What scrutiny?
Just the ongoing scrutiny of members wanting to understand more about the data, more about the impact, and our ability to be able to provide that data for your understanding.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mike Chaplin.
Yes, just got one question on the report. Page 15, section B, financial, stating that there's no financial implications arising from this report, but I read on page 13, 3.3, 2 risks escalated to high risk, object D, the DEFRA grant agreement, and we're stating that if a flat cash settlement or decrease in core grant is announced, it could have a significant impact on the authority. It just seems it's inconsistent.
I believe that this new guidance that's in this report template, that interpreted is that the actual report doesn't require any monetary budget. I believe, but I could possibly be wrong.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, I'm getting the nod from Emily at the back of the room that that's the correct answer from Sarah.
Yeah,
so.
no money required.
Okay. Was it on that issue, Ginny? Okay, but if I can take in order, Janet Dugdale next, please.
Yeah, thank you. And like James Beresford, I think this has been an excellent report, and it's very clear and lucid and easy to follow. And also congratulations on so much progress being made against plan. Just want to ask about the unsuccessful recruitment of a grant development and bid writing officer. We seem to be having problems with that, and given the issues we've just talked about in terms of the DEFRA grant and the increase in national insurance, I'd hope that we can get that moving so that we can find other means of bringing income in to enable us to meet our purposes. What are we able to do to try and get success in that area and get somebody into that role? What's happening?
Yeah, I think one problem is that these people are in high demand because everyone needs to raise money. And a lot of the skill set lies with charitable fundraising, and we are not a charity, and it makes it slightly harder and a bit more nuanced. So we have been unsuccessful. What we're doing immediately is we're taking some of that salary, if you like, and we're using it to pay for a consultant to help us with the big fundraising grant development, which is the new Landscape Connections. So we're putting some money into hiring a consultant, because that is what the Budrator would have done if they were in post. So we're kind of getting over it short term that way. But longer term, we will keep reviewing the job description. We're working with the foundation who've got some experience with this. It is just a really tough role to recruit for, and we're doing what we can to make it nuance the role, to make it more attractive, to make it more kind of coherent, make it clearer that it's working within effectively a local authority. But so it's a tricky one, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Simon Thompson, then Ginny Priestley.
Yeah, just on the delivery aim objective, subjective D, which is green, which is a medium-term financial plan showing a balanced budget. I just wonder whether that shouldn't more correctly be amber, because currently we don't show a balanced budget for the outer years, and there's a very good reason for that, but I think it should probably be amber rather than green at this stage.
Sarah, any comment on that?
No, I can definitely check with Sinead in terms of whether that should be, change of RAG status, but I'll note that down.
Thank you, Simon. Ginny Priestley.
Yes, thank you. My question is on page 13, Key Action Progress 3.2. Delivery of net income targets is tracking slightly below budget, in that we're going to have to become more and more financially sustainable ourselves. I just wondered what was actually driving that slightly below budget, because it would be really good to be above budget at this stage.
I certainly endorse that. Phil, do you want to take that?
I will. Emily might need to help me here, but I mean, I think some things are above budget actually. Despite us still waiting for DEFRA to give us the bylaw changes we need to do what we want to do with car parking, actually car parking income is tracking at or above budget, so that's a really good thing. The number of planning applications kind of coming into the system is lower than we had predicted, so that's tracking below. So I think visitor centre income is... We've scoped that out, yeah, because that's going through its own review. So, I mean, you have to look at the individual kind of lines that are up or down, but overall it's slightly down. Now, that is partly we need to revisit the expectations we made. Some of those were quite punchy expectations. And also the world's changed. So we need to kind of keep that. That is where in the medium-term financial forecast we're going to be kind of looking at how robust some of those income assumptions are and where we can push them further. Emily, have I covered the main ups and downs?
Yes, the main down is in terms of the pre-app advice, and we had to pause that when we didn't have all the posts that we needed filled. Now that those posts are in place and pre-app's been brought back in, obviously we hope to see an upturn in that, and feels correct that in other areas like our car parking are actually above, but overall it's just slightly lower than we expected. But a lot of work is obviously now being undertaken as part of the medium-term financial plan to look at what we project going forward and making sure that's as realistic as possible.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you, Phil. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, the recommendations are as in your paperwork and on the screen behind me. Can I have someone move the recommendations? James, thank you. Charles Greaves seconded. Can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. We'll move on to the next item in a moment. So we're on to agenda item 9, the local development scheme update, and Adele Metcalfe is here to make any responses. But do you have any comments that you wish to make initially, Adele?
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief introduction. The local development scheme is a statement that sets out the documents that make up the authority's development plan and the timetable for their review. We've made some minor amendments to the document to reflect the new timetable for the current local plan review. The government had previously advised that local plans being prepared under existing regulations, which ours are being prepared under, must be submitted by June 2025. That's now been changed. The deadline's now December 2026. So the LDS has been updated to reflect that new change, and there's a few consequent minor amendments being made throughout the document. But it's a very minor update to this public document.
Thank you, Adele. So it's a process we have to go through to update documentation. Any comments or questions, members? If not, could I have someone to move the recommendations which are on the board behind me? Janet Dugdale, seconded by Ken Rustage. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you, members. The recommendations are accepted. Thank you, Adele. Brief but useful, nevertheless. Are you going to... Some momentary pause whilst we swap officers, as it were. And we move on to item 10, Sheffield City Council Statement of Common Ground. And Brian Taylor, Head of Planning, here to answer any questions or comments and make a brief introduction, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to keep members informed of the progress of some joint work we're doing with Sheffield City Council to prepare a statement of common ground, and that will assist the preparation of the new Sheffield local plan, and also to get approval for an additional delegation to continue part of the mitigation planning that I'll just describe. In 2019, the authority approved a protocol granting delegated powers to the Chief Executive to progress the signing of such statements as part of our plan making and duty to cooperate on cross-boundary policy issues. So the protocol allows sign-off by the Chief Exec in consultation with chairs of authority and planning committee, and also commits to informing members as the statements are signed, hence this report today. This is a live case where officers have commented on the Sheffield plan, but not agreed to elements of it and the Habitats Regulations assessment as set out in the report. So these specifically relate to the potential for increased visitor impact on the National Park that we think is likely to arise both in itself and cumulatively, the existing position, from the growth planned in the Sheffield local plan, particularly for areas like the Eastern Moors, North Lees, Stanage, Bradfield. As a result of these concerns, we've had them raised and aired at the recent examination into the Sheffield local plan. It's actually still current, that process. Still some sessions left, I think. And a new statement of common ground has been proposed as a means of agreeing amendments to the plan and improving the mitigation to habitats for the planned growth. So officers are extremely grateful to the planners at Sheffield who have engaged positively on the need for effective and appropriate mitigation, and various improvements have been accepted to policy, the habitats assessment and the mitigation measures and delivery of those things. Policy amendments are now proposed, for instance, to the provision of open spaces closer to those residential areas as an alternative to the National Park, and also to encouragement of sustainable travel, both within the Sheffield area and out to the National Park specifically. That wasn't mentioned before. Moreover, amendments are proposed to policy relating to developer contributions, meaning that financial contributions should be made to support the agreed mitigations that will flow out of this work. The type and level of development that it will impact is still to be agreed, but the principle is extremely welcome, and our officers accept this need to be at a level that doesn't undermine the viability of the Sheffield Plan itself and its wider objectives. Obviously, we want the plan to be adopted to deliver this mechanism, but you know, we're not there to kind of undermine the plan in principle. Similarly, this statement of common ground will also say that the funding needs to be adequate to deliver the required mitigation. So it's got to be at a level that actually does the job for us also. Sheffield City Council will lead on the preparation of a mitigation delivery plan, which will be completed no later than 12 months after the adoption of the Sheffield Plan. So there's a further piece of work to come after this point where we agree the detail of that. As such, we also recommend creating an additional delegation in the recommendations to agree the mitigation plan at the appropriate time. I'd just like to suggest a minor change to the drafted recommendation 3, and that would bring it in line with the current protocol and change the words following the delegation to the head of planning to in consultation with the chair of authority and planning committee, which just allows a bit of internal connection and consultation on the detail. And again, we can share that. Officers are in regular contact with the planning officers leading on the Sheffield Plan, and we anticipate that the sign-up is now imminent to track the final stages of the public examination and to give confidence to the inspector leading that process that these issues can now be resolved. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Again, it's an update to keep members abreast of developments on this particular issue. Are there any comments or questions that anyone wishes to make? Matt Butler.
Yeah, it's good to hear about the HRA work. What's happening in terms of biodiversity net gain? Because in terms of sort of a significant thing will be improving the sustainability of paths for access and recreation. If you improve the surface of paths for access, then you're losing habitat according to Natural England. So we had a project come to Fipple, which couldn't happen because Sheffield City Council couldn't sort out the biodiversity net gain issues that they had so this could be significant. So I think it'd be really good to see what, sustainable path surfacing is going to be a key thing to address the issues around recreation on the habitats, but it could well have significant impact. It could be significantly impacted by the stuff around biodiversity net gain. Just highlighting the issue.
On that cogent point, Matt, but Brian, will that mitigation delivery plan descend into that type of detail, or is that something that needs to be flagged up so that it's not overlooked? But is the plan at a slightly higher level in terms of works, if you like?
Well, obviously the biodiversity net gain comes through a separate area of legislation, so that exists in statute anyway, and so the areas where they might not be able to deliver biodiversity net gain on site then gets into the realms of off-site provision. So I think what we have to do, and is being discussed across services now, is how we think about being a responsible body for handling habitat land banks, potentially in the parks, so that offsetting piece, and the legal frameworks that go with that, so the kind of standard covenants and legal agreements that allow that offsetting process to happen on development. So that's a separate area of law. What this is about really is understanding that for in addition to that almost really, for visitor impact, where, and let's say this is the point that will need to be agreed on, what scale of development these triggers hit at. So it's probably likely to be larger developments, but we can agree that. The things that we disagreed with in the existing mitigation plan were the fact that they were talking about fencing off areas of landscape, which would basically channel and direct people about cumulative effect of signage everywhere over the area, additional car parking in very sensitive areas, which, as we'll hear in the forum, it kind of goes at odds with how we want to think about the management of visitors to be sensitive to the environment. So what we're proposing is actually to spend that money more on ranger presence, on having signage at the right places rather than cumulatively through, and actually using the right materials, as you say, for footpaths in accordance with work that we would have funded normally through FIPL and moors and other things. So it's just really nuancing that whole approach to visitor management to how we would want to see that approached, rather than what felt like quite basic measures that were being proposed up front. So I think BNG is kind of will work in tandem with that, but there's separate frameworks to develop.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions, members? If not, the recommendation is on the board with a slight amendment that Brian has proposed. Could I have a mover and seconder? Charles and Janet, thank you very much. Show of hands, are all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members, that's unanimous. Thank you, Brian. We can move on to agenda item 11 in that case, the Boardroom Apprentice programme. Ruth, where's Ruth? Ah, there she is, hiding. Yep. Just do the customary swapping of officers.
Changing of the guard.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. Which hope, well, one of us can, Ruth, okay, thank you, members. Ruth Crowder, Customer Democratic Support Manager, here to answer any questions or comments. There's no introduction?
No, just to say, if you were minded to support the proposal, then the boardroom body would probably need to be a member of Programmes and Resources Committee to fully support the apprentice. Thank you.
So any members on Planning Committee are excused. Questions or comments? Andy, and then Martin, and then Becky, and Charlotte. Yep.
I welcome this. I think it's a really good idea and to bring some really good ideas and give them a chance to find out what this is like before they actually fully brilliant. If we do this, is there any commitment from the Secretary of State to prioritise those people in the selection process so they are adopted or have a better chance of being adopted? Because it's difficult to go through that 12 months and then not having a challenge to get in because they're not going to become an elected role.
I can give a personal opinion that Ruth.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. When I was chair of trustees of the Council of British Archaeology, we had a boardroom apprentice, and it was almost explicit that there shouldn't be an expectation that that person at the conclusion of their 12 months would either be eligible or would be elected to the board of the CBA. So I'm assuming that the expectation is just giving people experience of what a particular board is like, and it's then up to them to make their applications as to wherever or whatever.
Just to clarify the point I was trying to make is if people go through that and they get positive rights at the end, surely the Secretary of State should be prioritising them to come into these roles because it's only the Secretary of State that can appoint people to boards like this.
Yeah, it's a point. I don't think the Secretary of State or his civil servants have thought that far ahead, have they? But we'll take that on board, Andy. Thank you. Martin.
Right. I've been involved in somewhat similar activities before, and they can be very useful. We do need to recognise that we meet during the day,
and a lot of and for a lot of people, particularly mid-career, this would be damning in terms of their future career. Therefore, we need to be very supportive of it. The other thing is that a lot of the appointments are from constituent organisations of one form or another, either from the district, the council, or from the parishes, and there is an election process for those, and the candidates need to be aware of that, and that they would need to fulfil the roles required from those organisations.
Except, as I understand it, it's up to any individual to put themselves forward to be a boardroom apprentice. They don't have to go through any election process. They are, I mean, again, in my experience, the boardroom apprentice at the CBA was a solicitor from London, and she would travel during the day for daytime meetings from London, and she was given, I think, day release by her employers to attend because they saw it as a professional, a piece of CPD, a piece of professional development.
Well, district councillors have to be members of the council, and the parish members have to be members of the parish council.
Mm.
I think what...
But they aren't going to be a member.
I think what Martin's highlighting is the next stage on if they go through the process.
Okay.
I think it's the other side of the point I was making about the Secretary of State. And if you have to be an elected official to become a board member, that's a whole barrier further than just going through that process.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I was getting the wrong end of the stick. I was looking at it as a pre-application issue. My apologies, Martin. Okay. Becky Woods. Next.
Thank you, Chair. Very formal, full name. Just a couple of questions. So, would they be able to voice their opinion at meetings by speaking to an agenda item, but then they can't vote?
That's right.
And secondly, what happens if nobody puts themselves forward as a boardroom buddy? Does it then become the chair of PAL's responsibility to be the buddy?
It's a condition of the scheme that they need a boardroom buddy. So if we want to support this, then you would have to agree a boardroom buddy for them.
But to answer your first question, yes, they would be able to participate, but they wouldn't be able to vote. Yeah, it's part of the process of, if you like, acculturation. I got you, Ruth. Yeah, okay. I'll be coming on to the well, in terms of the boardroom buddy. I'll say what I was going to say at the end, but I'll say it now. Our legal advice is that it should be someone who's on Programmes and Resources Committee. We will be looking for a volunteer. I don't expect people to come forward now, though if someone does, that's a benefit. But I would ask members of P&R to consider and get in touch with Ruth by the end of next week, because we need to move this on. If we don't have anyone come forward voluntarily, we might make, this is the imperial we, of course, we might make some telephone calls. If no one is either voluntarily or willing to become a boardroom buddy, then the scheme will fall. And that's how it. We have to abide by the framework that's being imposed upon us. And if no one puts themselves forward to be an apprentice, for example, or to be a boardroom apprentice, then it would again, we would be patted on the head, thanked for our interest, and sent packing until next year. Okay. Charlotte Farrell.
Thanks. I think it's a good idea, but I don't understand to what extent it's going to improve diversity of membership, which I think is something that we really need to consider. So, I mean, what the Yorkshire Dales is doing, I think, sounds good. I suppose it's how are these people, do we advertise? It seems to me it's probably just going to be the same people applying. That I just wonder how it works.
Please, Ruth.
As far as I understand, there's a eligibility criteria for applicants. So if someone's already been through the boardroom apprentice, they can't reapply. So it will always be different people. It's anybody over the age of 18, and also provided they haven't been a member of a board elsewhere. It's got to be somebody who's got no experience of a board, because this is to give them the experience. We haven't really been able to say what sort of person we're looking for, other than we are trying to have a more diverse board. So it's just whoever applies and whether anybody is matched with us.
I think we have to differentiate between the organisations that might already or might be minded to co-opt. That's within our gift, if you like, as to who we might wish to appoint for whatever purposes. This is a completely separate thing where we're just putting ourselves forward in order to give someone some experience of what a board might be like. They may or may not have an interest in a national park and its governance and its management. It's to enable them to gain that experience. It is a different element that is completely separate to a co-option or changing the size of the board or anything along those lines that might otherwise be considered. Janet Dugnall.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a great idea that we should be supporting. I think there's opportunities to bring in, first of all, it's good citizenship, I think, and we'll be good people by giving individuals opportunities to experience what a board's like who wouldn't get that opportunity otherwise. It doesn't mean that we're apprenticing them to become a member of this board. It could be any board in a charity or an NGO or another public body. But there is a dearth of diverse people entering boards in whatever sector, and I think this gives a great opportunity for that. I don't think it should preclude the idea of us looking at other means or ways of diversifying the board, particularly co-opting, and I don't think that's an either-or situation. And I'm hopeful that we'll get a member of the Programmes and Resources Committee to volunteer to be a buddy.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Charles Greaves.
Thanks, Chair. I know the programme's the apprentice programme, but that language don't particularly help, does it? It's more of an internship than an apprentice. To me, an apprentice is that progression to a role. So as long as everybody's clear on what it is and what it isn't, including the applicant. My main question, though, is around who's doing the recruitment, where are the... where's the apprentice going to be sourced from? How's that being promoted? Who does the actual selection? It's not something I've ever heard of before, and maybe I'm just a little bit concerned that it might be really focused on London and with just people dripping out, and maybe we get given who's on the programme, whether or not they really match up well with us. So what's that process for recruitment and selection?
Well, I'll call on Ruth in a moment. Just again, from my experience, it was DEFRA that did all the advertising and recruiting. It's the individuals who apply who express an interest in what they look at, who has put them, what organisations have put themselves forward, and it's then down to the applicants to decide where they want to go. And if the two things do marry up, then there's a marriage made in heaven kind of approach. But Ruth, you might have a different take.
I don't want to contradict you, but going on the information I've got, the programme promote it, and if you agree to accept these proposals, then we will be promoting it ourselves as well through our social media and publicity channels. And that's the same for anybody that's a host. They're expected to promote it as well. As far as I understand it, the applicants, once their applications are in, they are matched to hosts by a panel who are ex-apprentices. That's as far as I know at the moment. So we can't input into the selection, it's done by them.
I'll keep quiet in future, Ruth, on this. Okay. I hope that was satisfactory. Okay. Yeah. Ruth Spetnam.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I largely agree with Janet's earlier comments about our role as a large public authority, that, you know, we are part of civil society, and that piece is important to our work as well in terms of general upskilling of the population, I suppose. But I suppose my question was, I'm still not entirely clear from what's written on here and what you've said, is this an entirely open application process? Because it implies in 2.1 that there are specific organisations from which these people are drawn. Is that true? And if that's the case, I then have some concerns about it all just ending up being the same sort of people who get given those access. Now, it's a separate concern about diversification, but it's just about equity. And you know, we know there are so many hidden barriers to people taking part in things like this. I don't know if, can you clarify that? I'm not completely crystal clear about that application process.
Well, I think for me, the clue is in it says including, from the various organisations, including, it's not an exhaustive list. But Ruth.
I can, all I can say is from all the information I have, the applications are open to anybody over 18 to apply. And it's just the host bodies that come from public sector, charities, there's various. I mean, there are some government departments, there are museums, Natural England, Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park have had one this year. The various other National Coal Authority.
So basically
Nexus.
it is, as far as you know, a
open.
completely
Yeah.
open process.
Yes.
That's all I needed to hear. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. James. In that case, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a good idea. I think Charles has asked the question that one of the questions I was going to ask about the recruitment and selection process. So thank you for the answer for that. I just wanted to ask for clarity. When we say adding diversity to the membership, diversity is a very broad scope, and I just want some clarification or any additional information in terms of what are we wanting to add to the membership in terms of diversity.
I'm sorry?
That's what I was told. Is that something for your paper in the forum to discuss?
Yeah, it could well be something that we discuss in the think piece that the Chief Exec has provided for the forum. But for me, from the two boardroom apprentices I've seen, they have been younger people. And it's that kind of diversity, I suppose, that we can try to address. But ultimately, whilst it might be an ambition and something we've expressed to DEFRA, that we would like something that adds a little more diversity to our authority, to our board, it's not directly in our gift. We can only express an interest. Does that kind of answer?
Not quite.
Okay.
But if you choose to discuss it in the forum, then fine. I'm open to more discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. James.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I will preface my comment with the fact that I'm entirely supportive of this. It should happen, and it is, as I think has been said by Ruth and Janet, good citizenship, so absolutely support it. Do we have a final say? What happens if we don't? What happens if the person, and if we don't have a final say, what happens if this person is entirely disruptive, etc., etc.? I'm sure that won't be the case, but are there any checks and controls on this?
Yeah. I think that, if I may,
Should I not have asked that?
Well, you can ask it, but as far as I'm aware, we don't have a say. I mean, to an extent, why should we? But the applicant will, the successful applicant, if such there is, will be subject to our code of conduct and all the constraints that come with that.
I would never disagree with the chair.
Well, that's a first.
However, to my mind, it would be entirely beneficial to both parties if we did have a view, because we may feel that we could give something more to certain candidates than we might to other candidates. But if it is what it is what it is, and I would support it.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with you about disagreeing with me, but I would say we're in a similar position, I think, as we are with Secretary of State appointees. We express a preference, but ultimately the power lies in London. So I think that's where we are with the apprentice scheme as well. Okay. Mike just murmured that's how we got you, James, which I think is a tad. But that's perhaps to settle over lunch. Okay. So Ken Richardson.
Yeah, it's a good scheme, and but I just want to make sure that on the off chance that you can't get a willing or coerced volunteer, that you want me to all us in here who may want to be the mentor, as opposed to it falling. It also says there's 8 learning days, so have you got a plan in mind, or where do they get that learning from?
I think on the first point noted,
Yeah.
we will consult with the oracle that suggested the buddy should come from PNR.
And I just want to put my marker down. I'm old-fashioned, and I'm an apprentice-trained engineer. Apprentices don't work in boardrooms. Trainees might, though.
Yeah, I think it's in the naming of the parts that the issue. Yeah. But Ruth will address the second bit.
Yes, the training days are provided by the programme, not us. We would do our usual induction for them, but the training days are with the programme.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? In which case, we have a recommendation with a slight modification on number 3, that the boardroom buddy should be a member of Programmes and Resources Committee. On the basis of that slight alteration, could I have someone to move the recommendation? Janet Dugdale, Matt seconded, thank you. A show of hands, all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions, thank you. That recommendation is moved. Thank you, members. We now move on to agenda item 12, a report from the Chair of Programme and Resources Committee. Janet Dugdale?
My report is there has been no Programme and Resources Committee since the last authority meeting.
Thank you. And that moves us hastily on to the report from the Chair of Planning Committee in Patrick's absence. Ginny Priestley, as Deputy Chair, Vice Chair.
There's been one planning committee since the last meeting that had a very short agenda. A planning application for honey production was approved in principle against officer recommendation, subject to details being agreed with officers. The number of new applications has dropped, possibly because of uncertainties over what the new government intends, and partly perhaps because of the complexities of the new nature recovery requirement. The main issue was the quarterly enforcement report. The committee is asked to be informed at least annually about the number of outstanding and unresolved complaints there are, and for regular reports on those cases where enforcement notices are in effect but not complied with within a reasonable time.
Thank you, Ginny. That moves us on to the final item, which is reports from outside bodies. None have been submitted. So on that basis, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close this meeting. Thank you for your attendance and contributions. I would exhort folk to